In this video, I'm going to teach you 5 things that every worship leader needs to know about sound. Want to hear them real quick? The first one is how sound works and how your hearing works. Not just for you, but the rest of your band and your congregation. The second one is how to use mics and DIs the right way so that you can use the tools on stage properly and get a good signal to the soundboard. The third one is how to mix your monitors, because when you can hear yourself well and hear your band well, you can play better together. Fourth is how to communicate with your sound techs, and fifth is how to set them up for success. If that's all you want to know, awesome. Go find another video and we'll see you in the next one. If you want to learn more, my name is James and I help church sound techs and worship leaders eliminate the mystery and frustration around sound at church. So let's watch the rest of the video and find out more to these 5 things that you need to know as a worship leader. The way sound works is important because when you understand what is actually happening, you know what the gear is doing to stuff, right? So if you know that sound waves are variations in air pressure and that air molecules have to wiggle back and forth really quickly for us to perceive them as sound, that's really helpful when you know that your speaker system has to wiggle back and forth in order to reproduce sounds. It's also helpful to understand the bridge between the frequency spectrum, which we'll find on equalizers and spec sheets for microphones, and the musical notes on a piano or any other instrument for that matter, to know what range a certain thing is and to know what notes are producing what frequency, or even to know what frequency balance happens with a particular instrument in its different parts, like the pick of a guitar string has not just the fundamental note where it rings, but also the overtones and the percussiveness. When you understand that, sound gets a lot easier. It's also helpful to know how our ears perceive sound, because that will affect the way that you play and sing. It'll affect the way that you make tone adjustments to your singers' microphones. All of that makes a big difference for getting intelligibility and clarity out of your sound system. I mean, everybody knows that clarity and intelligibility are critical at church. So if you know what things are in the way of that, because of the way that your ear perceives sound, you're going to be much better suited to give directions to your sound team and to even ask for different things in the arrangement or how much sub-level you're getting from on stage. One quick tidbit is that the equal loudness curve, or how our ears perceive different frequencies over different intensities, along with the principle of masking, which is loud sounds cover up quiet sounds, and low frequencies cover up high frequencies. All of that blended together means that if we get rid of unwanted low frequencies in our inputs, things will sound much clearer. So what does that mean for you? On a practical level, it means that the high-pass filter can be a very useful tool for cleaning up your mix and getting clarity in a hurry. I made a whole video about it. You can check that out up here if you'd like. Additionally, it's really helpful to have accurate information on what noise exposure will damage your hearing as a band member or musician on stage, or the congregation's hearing if they're exposed to noise level for too long. And it also is helpful for talking to that one congregant that maybe thinks that everything is too loud because it's louder than their shower that morning, right? Some people just have a preference of things that are quote unquote damaging their hearing, and others actually are talking about legitimate concerns for their health and their hearing health over time. You have to be able to understand those background things and kind of the scientific part behind it in order to give an accurate assessment, and not to also dismiss somebody that their preference isn't actually hurting them, but their preference might be the way that you actually want to lead rather than the way that it's being mixed right now. I know I just threw a bunch of different stuff at you all at once, but trust me, it gets a lot easier to understand when you know the terms and you understand what we're actually measuring when we're measuring loudness over time and what thresholds we have for how long we can be exposed to sounds. The second thing that you need to know about sound as a worship leader is how to use mics and DIs the proper way. Now, you might just think I just walk up to the microphone and as long as it's kind of close to my mouth and as long as my guitar is plugged in, everything's great. But what happens when you need to unplug your guitar? And what happens if the way that you're talking into the microphone or somewhat near the microphone is actually creating feedback problems that are causing a distraction, right? We have to know how to use our equipment the right way in order to get a great signal to the board in the first place. One quick tip I'll give you on this is to try to maximize your signal to noise ratio. That's a bunch of fancy words for the sounds we want compared to the sounds that we don't want. If we increase the level of the sounds that we want and don't do anything to the level of the sounds that we don't want, we've increased our signal to noise ratio. On the other side, if we keep our signal at the same level and we found out a way to decrease the noise or the sounds that we don't want, we've also increased our signal to noise ratio. Now, why this is important is sometimes you've got a quiet input on stage, like your voice, right next to a loud input on stage, like a drum kit. So when we use our tools the right way, so the polar pattern of the microphone or the way that the microphone wants to pick up more in one direction rather than another, then we can get the signal of our voice rather than the noise of the drums in that microphone. And when our sound tech pushes up that fader for our voice, we're not just getting more washy drums. So the other way that we can increase the signal to noise ratio is we put the microphone really close to the sound source. This means that we need to be all up on the microphone, and it doesn't sound good down here, doesn't sound good down here, and if I was holding it down by my belly button, it wouldn't sound good down there either. The microphone also wants to be pointed at the sound source, so if you point it right down your mouth, that's going to sound better than if you're talking across it like it's an ice cream cone that you're holding. And that brings up my next point. You need to know how to hold the microphone properly, and this is my favorite analogy. This is an ice cream cone. So imagine this is the ice cream, and that's a lot of fun, and this is the tip of the ice cream cone at the very bottom. We're going like sugar cone, not cake cone for this analogy. Is that right? I was getting confused. The one that's kind of like a little waffle cone, that's what I mean. So we want to hold the microphone right in the middle of the handle. That's what it's made for. We don't want to hold it up here, and we don't want to hold it over the connector. Now, if you have a wireless microphone, usually the antenna that carries the wireless signal back and forth is right here at the end as well. So if you put your hand over that, that's going to create problems with getting your wireless signal back to the receiver, and you don't want to do that. So don't put your hand on the ice cream, and don't break off the tip of your ice cream cone and have ice cream running down your hand. Another tip is that instruments need a direct box. So we can't just take the guitar and plug the output here from the pickup straight into our soundboard. That's either going to be very noisy or it's going to be a very weak signal and things won't be good. Even if we just use a plain old adapter that takes it from a 1/4 inch to a mic cable, still not the best option. What you really need is a direct box. Now, this is an inexpensive one. You can get them for $60. You can spend $300 or $400 or $500 on one. But what this does is it converts the signal from what your guitar outputs to what a microphone would output, and then you can carry that over a long distance to your soundboard. So that's going to eliminate more of the noise, or the signal that you don't want, out of your signal from your guitar or your keyboard. Now, the third area of things you need to know as a worship leader is how to mix your monitors and how to teach your band how to do the same thing. Because in all the people that I've talked to who play music at church, none of them got lessons on how to mix their monitors when they were learning to play their instrument. Now, for monitoring, we're trying to encourage a great performance, and there are 3 main points of a great performance: pitch, pulse, and passion. Or put another way, we need to be in the middle of the pitch, we need to be in the right timing, and we have to have the right dynamics. So pitch, pulse, and passion is easy to remember than pitch, timing, and dynamics. Hey, we're all about learning here at Attaway Audio. So for your monitor mix, after you put any of your monitors in or you've got a monitor wedge on stage, you need 4 basic things. You need a pitch reference, you need a timing reference, you need a lead reference, which is usually the worship leader and their vocal, but is something to lead you to tell you what's going on with the song, and you need to hear yourself so that you can know if you're matching the pitch and timing and the dynamics of everyone else. Now, if you can get this right for yourself and you can play and sing with immaculate tone and great timing and perfect intonation, that's fantastic. But the rest of your team needs to learn how to do it too. As a worship leader, sometimes you have to lead your bass player and your drummer, which you might not play either of those, to make a mix that works well for them also. So being able to not just understand what you need, but also understand what your team's individual needs are, is going to go a long way to helping you get them set up for success with their monitor mix. Remember how we talked about how your hearing works a little while ago? Well, that also applies here because you have to train and warn your team not to expose themselves to too loud of sounds in their monitor mix so that they damage their hearing after having rehearsal and maybe sound check on Sunday morning and then 2 services. Within that time frame, it's very easy to overexpose yourself to noise without anybody else knowing. So that's one other reason why you have to learn both the physics of sound and the perception of sound a little bit in order to lead your team well in monitoring their mixes. You're not just in charge. These people are in your charge. So you have to take care of them and teach them how to take care of their hearing. The 4th thing about sound you need to know as a worship leader is how to communicate with your sound tech. Now, if you play guitar and you've dabbled a little bit in piano, you can communicate easily with a piano player because you're speaking a common language and you have a little bit of experience with their instrument. If you're a guitar player and you're trying to talk to the drummer, you better be pretty good at beatboxing to kind of communicate the type of beat that you want, right? And that rarely goes well. But if you're a great beatboxer, let me know down in the comments below. Oh, and your drummer probably makes fun of your beatboxing when you're not around. Just letting you know that. However, when it comes to communicating with your sound tech, if you have no clue what their instrument does, if you have no clue what changes they can actually make, you're going to be much more limited in the way that you can communicate with them. So in communicating with the sound tech, you have to learn how to play their instrument. No, I am not saying that you need to quit being on stage for a whole month and only run sound. And nor am I saying that you have to be the best sound mixer at your church in order to effectively communicate with your sound team. But you need to know the basics on what their board can do and what the board can't do in order to communicate effectively what you're asking them to do. Another thing that's really important is to understand the values that you have for your mix so that you can communicate that in feeling words, not in technical words, right? Because you might not be able to tell the sound tech, I need you to put the lead vocal at negative 6.3 dB on the fader. Nobody cares about that. What they do care about is, hey, I need the lead vocal to be out in front of the band, but not so far out in front that we don't have the support of the band. By putting clear parameters on how the mix should feel, and then understanding the limitations of what the board can do to fine-tune the arrangement that you're sending from on stage, that's going to make communication with your sound tech go much better. One other thing that you have to remember when communicating with your sound tech is that it does not sound on stage like it does in the room. And though you might get a general idea of how the reverberance in the room and the slap back off the back wall might be informing your decision for how you think it sounds, it's much, much different in front of the speakers out in the room than it is on stage where you are. So please be careful in giving specific directions, like, can you put a ton of reverb on my voice and then put some more on top of that? Or, hey, I need you to turn the vocals way, way, way up when they're already out in front of the mix and they're plenty up. That can sap some of the trust that you have between you and your sound tech. Phrases that are helpful are specific and timely. Like, hey, in this song, Bethany's going to be taking the chorus, so can you make sure that her vocal mic is up even at the end of verse 2 so we don't miss that cue? That's a helpful thing to say. Or something like, on Blessed Be Your Name, I want the electric guitar to be the primary instrument, whereas How Great Is My God, I want the acoustic guitar to be the primary instrument. This communicates values and then lets the sound person take it from there. You're not giving specific directions on how many dB to turn this up or down. You can kind of avoid some of that. Now, it is possible to get so good at ear training with frequency recognition that you can actually ask for specific frequencies to be turned up or down in a certain way. But that takes a long time and it's a great thing, but it can also feel a little bit micromanagey. We want to avoid that with all of our team. The final thing that you need to know about sound as a worship leader is how to set your sound team up for success. One of the biggest complaints that I get from worship leaders and even pastors is they have a sound team and they have multiple people coming in and out, but they don't get consistency from week to week. So you need to be able to set them up with clear values and then clear systems to be able to attain consistency if that's what you're going for. If you want a totally different band feel from week to week, you're going to have to work on that. But most people are looking for good mixes, but good consistent mixes where they feel about the same and people aren't having to walk in and wonder what the expectation is going to be for that Sunday. We're doing all of this so that people can focus on Christ alone through the spoken and the sung word of God, right? So if people are wondering, what's it going to be like today? Am I going to be at a rock show, or am I going to be at a folk show? Or is this going to be polka? Or is this going to be EDM? If they're wondering about that, they're probably not thinking about Christ alone in that moment. They're kind of brace themselves for what might be coming at them sonically. So imagine with me that you've got a consistent team from week to week. And imagine with me that you've got a team that when something goes wrong, it gets fixed and tracked down quickly rather than taking your whole rehearsal. This is why I recommend having a base scene or a starting place for everybody to use as their vanilla starting place for a mix. It doesn't mean they can't customize stuff. It doesn't mean that the music can't shift from song to song. But if everybody has most of the parameters mostly dialed in to sound clear and consistent from week to week, you're going to have a much easier time getting that consistency, whether it's one person mixing versus another. Another thing that's really helpful is to have a clear input list. This is a map of where everything's plugged in and where it should be plugged in. So imagine you had rehearsal on Thursday, but then on Saturday there's a wedding and stuff had to get torn down. If you've got a roadmap for where to plug all that stuff back in, you're going to have a much easier time getting set up for Sunday morning. Along the same lines, if something is suddenly not working and it may have been plugged in the wrong place, the input list allows you a map of where should this be plugged in so that you can track it down. You're not having to reverse engineer what it is now. You're just trying to find what it should be and get it in that place right away. This could save you hours and hours of lost rehearsal time over the course of a year. So it's definitely worth the effort you put in to making that input list. It's also super helpful to have a checklist of what a startup and shutdown procedures are and what expectations are. Because inevitably you're going to have new people and you're going to have to train someone new. If they know that there's written down somewhere all the steps they have to take, it puts a lot of pressure off of them to have to remember every single thing to not mess it up. And there's nothing worse than being a brand new sound tech and messing something up and getting a sound tech solo. What's a sound tech solo? It's where the congregation turns around and looks at the sound tech because there's a glaringly obvious problem that they're wondering why they haven't fixed yet. Yeah, I get a little stressed out just thinking about it. So you want to avoid that for your sound tech, and having a checklist for your sound tech is one way that they can not forget certain things. If you're a worship leader, you're probably over the lights and the screens and maybe the video too, so having checklists for them is not a bad idea. I highly recommend it. In addition to all this, of course, we have to have clear expectations for how the mix should sound, and that needs to be a discussion that keeps going and that it becomes clarified and people learn how to feel what it should feel like, in addition to knowing how loud it should be on, say, an SPL meter. So to review, you need to understand 5 basic things about sound in order to be a great worship leader and lead your team well. You need to know how sound works and how your hearing works. You need to know how to use the mics and DIs you have on stage to get the best signal to the soundboard possible and teach the rest of your team how to do it too. In addition to teaching your team that, you have to understand how to mix your monitors and get your whole team to do that well. Because when you hear each other well, you play and sing better. And when you can hear each other well and sing with confidence, things go way up and it becomes much better for everyone involved. On a basic level, of course. You have to know how to communicate with your sound techs, and that requires that you know a little bit about their instrument and how it works. You don't have to be a super nerd, and you don't have to go super deep into all the background stuff and the decibels and all this weird stuff. You don't have to get into that, but you have to know what the board can do and what the board can't do. And you need to hear when something's gone wrong or something's gone too far, so then you can point somebody back in the right direction so that they can fix it. Finally, you need to have the tools in place and the systems available for your team to succeed every week and get consistent results. So this has been a very broad overview, and I've tried to unpack some of the big picture topics of what you need to know as a worship leader in order to excel with your sound team and the rest of your worship team. If you want to be able to go deeper and put these into practice in a step-by-step way with notes and videos guiding you through the process, I've just released my course Audio for Worship Leaders. I don't use any big words without also defining them, and it's not super technical. So even if you're a hardcore creative type that doesn't understand a anything technical, you can understand what's going on in this course and follow along to develop your skills as a worship leader. I've even got worksheets that you can fill in the blank as you go, and that can become your manual for getting out of a pinch when something comes up. The course is available on its own or as a part of the Attaway Audio Academy, and you can find more information about both of those through the link down in the description below. If you enjoyed this video and you're a worship leader trying to figure out all this sound stuff, you found the right place, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and mash that thumbs up while you're at it. It really helps me with the algorithm and to find more worship leaders that need help just like you. And as always, remember, it's all about the low end, avoid the sound tech solo, and nobody leaves church humming the kick drum. We'll see you back here next time on Attaway Audio.